Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM. AM 630. WMAL.
8:37. Mary Catherine's back in the house this morning. Brian Eben, Brian Wilson here as well. Larry Kudlow's on the line, host of the Kudlow Report on CNBC. Check him out, 7 o'clock on your TV. And also the Larry Kudlow radio show here on WMAL, Saturday nights at 7 p.m. So it was a pretty good day on Wall Street yesterday, Larry. So does that mean Black Friday, the results, pretty good numbers from that trumping fears in Europe? Is that what you saw yesterday?
Actually, I think Black Friday was a big positive, but I think yesterday was also a very big Europe story. Very big. I mean, they're talking about a new plan to create fiscal union. Okay, read Germany, and Germany is going to essentially tell Italy, Greece, Spain, Portugal, here's what you have to do. And if you don't do it, we're not going to give you any money. No more bailouts, nothing from the European Central Bank, nothing. Zippo. That's one element of it. And they can do it by bilateral agreements. They don't have to go through a lot of voter ratification. That was one rumor coming out of Europe. There were a lot of stories about it. There's a second story that the IMF, get this, the IMF will put up an $800 billion rescue fund to rescue these governments in trouble. This here is a terrible idea. By the way, the U.S. owns 17% of the IMF. We're going to have something to say about that. And everybody's waiting for the European Central Bank to rescue the government. So you've got these stories coming out of Europe, which I think really drove the market yesterday. I agree about Black Friday. I think that was a positive number. I'm not convinced that that's going to last because a lot of people might have lunged into Thanksgiving and Friday and Cyber Monday, and they may have shot their wad. I mean, they may not have any more money left for Christmas shopping later on this year. I'm a little concerned about that because there's not much jobs and there's not much income.
Yeah, there's a story out there, Larry, that has not gotten at least a lot of attention. I haven't noticed much being reported on it, that says that the Federal Reserve secretly committed not billion, but $1 trillion to save banks during the financial crisis, and they really weren't honest about what was going on. What do you know about this story, and is there any there?
Oh, I think there is there. This is kind of an old rehash of the 2008 rescue. I know Drudge played this at the top of the website most of yesterday, or a lot of yesterday. I don't really think this is brand new information. Maybe the details are bank by bank. I mean, all along, the Federal Reserve, which made loans, let me see if I can make this as clear as I can. For emergency purposes, they added liquidity and made loans on demand for a whole group of U.S. banks and international banks that did business in the U.S. That's key, that did business in the U.S. To stop a collapse of the banking system in the fall of 2008. Now, I don't know everything about this story there is to know, but this has cropped up before. And I've always felt two things. Number one, I think the Fed did what it had to do to save the system. But number two, and this is the part that troubles me, it's kind of a Ron Paul point, the Fed was never transparent about what exactly they did. And
that's the larger question, I think.
And I think the transparency point, which, again, I'm going to call a Ron Paul point. I've interviewed Ron Paul 5, 6, 7 times, and this always comes up, and I think the guy's dead right, that they should have told us whom. Now, the Fed has a history of secrecy so as not to create a run on the bank. Yeah. That would be their point of view. But I think after the fact, okay, a year or two after the fact, the U.S. public does have a right to know what the central bank did.
Yeah, their point would have been, listen, we can't make this public at the time because if other banks find out that, just say, Citi is in dire trouble, then, Citi's going to go under. What's the point of giving these loans?
You'd head for the hills, and it would be bad, and it would also be wrong. But I think after the fact, the Fed did have an obligation. This probably came under the Freedom of Information Act. And these are, by the way, it's not like they're making loans to BNP Paribas in Paris. They're making loans to the foreign banks that did business here, that took deposits here and did business here. I don't know that I disagree with that. I probably would agree with that at the time, but I do think they should tell us. They should fess up. Fess up, Fed.
We've been talking a little bit this morning about Barney Frank exiting the building. As a guy who followed the entire crisis,
I was the guy he fessed up to. It was a Kudlow interview where he said mea culpa.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. He did it the same day. I think he did it to me, and he did it to Neil Cavuto, and he said he was wrong, and he said given loans to people without incomes and documentation of incomes and low-income housing was not a good idea, and it all had to be changed. And Fannie and Freddie has to be scrapped, and we need a private system. Now, that was, by the way, Mary Catherine, coincidentally, a few weeks before his congressional race in Massachusetts in 2010, when this young, I believe, Marine, I can't remember his name, we interviewed him too, ex-Marine, was cutting into 10 points on the margins there.
Yes.
I think that Micron is about right on that.
All right. Hey, before we let you go, there's big talk about extending the payroll tax. Is this something the Republicans should get on board with?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think so. Not unless look, the payroll tax extension last year didn't work. And it's blowing a hole in the budget deficit. In fact, it'll be $110 billion. That's bigger than the first year of the super committee's across-the-board budget cut, which is $70 billion in 2013. And I think the GOP ought to stick to their guns. Temporary tax cuts financed by permanent tax increases on those most likely to invest and create jobs is a dumb idea. All right, the emperor has no clothes here.
Gotcha.
And I think the GOP should insist on the kind of full-fledged tax reform. They've got a year to do it now with the super committee. That's the pro-growth measure. Another lousy rebate is terrible policy, terrible politics, and blows a hole out of the budget deficit. John Kyle had it right, and he ought to stick to his guns, and the GOP ought to look themselves in the eye and say no more. Whether it's Bush rebates or Jimmy Carter rebates or Jerry Ford rebates or Barack Obama rebates.
No rebates.
Don't go there. It has no effect, no incentives. All you're doing is spending money you don't have.
All right, Larry. Hey, it's great to have you on as always. Appreciate it.